Mark Zuckerberg took the stand in the first day of Meta's FTC antitrust trial, focusing on the company's acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp. In a 2012 email, the Meta CEO wrote that the company needed to get our act together because it faced competition from Instagram. The FTC argues it acquired the company to establish a monopoly. For more, let's bring in Moselle Thompson, former FTC commissioner and former member of the Facebook advisory board. Moselle, always good to grab some time with you. So, as we're continuing to watch this play out with Zuckerberg and the FTC, what is the reality of what this outcome could look like and how Facebook once again, or Meta Platforms rather, is once again in the position of defending an acquisition of a company that was way, way smaller back then at that time?
I'm glad that you raised that. You know, we all seem to forget at the time that they acquired Instagram was 20 people, and it paid $1 billion for it, and everybody thought they were crazy. So that was a very interesting time. You know, it's interesting. The government has framed this as that Meta bought Instagram and WhatsApp in order to eliminate competition. And because of that, those products have become worse for consumers than they could have been, and that the actual market is actually the personal social networking, which is among friends. Meta, on the other hand, has a different version or a different view of what the market is and what they were doing. They said it was strategic. Those products have become better. They still remain free, and that the market is actually much bigger. Friends actually are a very small part of what these apps do and what the market is. And the market is actually much broader in terms of competition with companies like TikTok and X and YouTube, and those provide the real competitive marketplace. So it's interesting that we're also looking at these transactions, not only what they were thinking then, that's not only Meta, but also what the U.S. government was thinking then, but what has actually happened since then. 10 years, over 10 years is a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting, Moselle, because you mentioned TikTok, X, YouTube, all competition, but given how similar to the end consumer that those platforms look to some of the Meta platforms, is that argument going to be enough that competition still exists outside of Meta?
Well, I think that it is pretty real. You know, one of the things that I have found interesting in the framing yesterday is that the FTC says that the market is actually smaller than it really is. That if you look at the broader market, Meta only controls 30% of that market. You have all these other companies out there. And I think if you look at it from an advertising space, most advertisers view that market is the larger market. They want to figure out how to get to all of those different segments within the marketplace.
So with that in mind, if this is a precedent-setting case, then who should be on high alert next? Because there are a lot of these other companies, too, that are on screen right now that have made some very lucrative acquisitions that have been able to essentially find synergies, be able to grow out and scale the businesses that they've acquired higher when they are finally fully kind of making the deal consummated at the end of the day.
Well, it's unprecedented in a couple of ways. One is it's rare to have a possible remedy like divestiture. It's rare to do that after the agency actually made a pass. They actually ruled on this transaction over a decade ago. In addition, that the technology industry is iterative. They build on other technologies and ideas of others before it. And the acquisition of other companies and hiring of other people have been an integral part of what innovation has been about. So does this mean that anytime a company goes through the process of acquiring additional innovation, that they'll be viewed as a lens of competition? So it's a very interesting new territory. And this would be unprecedented if we're to go in that direction and possibly send a pretty chilling effect throughout the industry.
Mazel, we've got about 30 seconds left. Just curious how you're thinking about what regulation is going to look like under this administration. There was a lot of hope from Wall Street about deregulation, but then the Trump administration said they would mirror Biden-era regulatory practices. Where does that leave things?
Well, at this point, they've done a couple of different things. One is they've continued their enforcement actions in the antitrust area. But what's interesting is how they've done that. They've also the executive have taken control, and they've been very clear about that in their executive order, of these agencies. So they're not independent anymore. They report to the executive. In addition, that the FTC has also fired the 2 Democratic commissioners,
Right.
so that there's no possibility of dissent within the actions of the agency. That we have never seen.
Right. All right, Moselle, great context there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.